Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'm Josh Freed, the Vice President for Clean Energy at Third Way, and we are really excited to be hosting this event this morning and our Carbon Tech Showcase this afternoon in partnership with XPRIZE and the Center for Carbon Removal. This morning, we will be sharing a sneak peek of our new carbon capture map, which identified more than 300 projects and test centers, including power plants, industrial sources, bioenergy, direct air capture, and use around the globe right now. Our goal with this map is to illustrate there is an entire universe of carbon capture and carbon tech projects being developed and deployed across the globe. And there's an enormous opportunity for us to build on the recent passage of the Future Act and the quick movement of the Use It Act to support this vital emissions reduction technology. This action is why we are so thrilled to have Senators Heitkamp and Whitehouse here with us today. They are incredibly effective leaders on carbon capture and clean energy. And we all know that it is not easy, to say the least, to move and enact legislation in Congress these days, but that is exactly what they are doing over and over again with carbon capture and clean energy technology bills. So please join me in welcoming Senators Heitkamp and Whitehouse to the stage to have a conversation with what's next on carbon capture, which will be moderated by Brad Plumer, a reporter on climate and energy issues for the New York Times. Thank you.
Where do you want to? Okay. I don't want to sit next to Sheldon.
We knew each other before this gig, so
We were AGs
forgive us
together.
if we needle each other a bit. She gets lonely in that state she comes from where there isn't anybody.
Yeah, the only state smaller in population is Rhode Island.
In your dreams.
Yeah,
All right.
this one. I think these are for the room and that one's for the there. So we're good.
Mine works.
All right,
We're good.
So let's dive right in with questions. So carbon capture obviously has been around for a while. In the news, it's had a few negative headlines with projects that didn't quite pan out. Kemper down in Mississippi, bad headlines around Boundary Dam in Canada. So I'm sort of curious, and it's been discussed for years, and there have been some promising projects as well down in Texas. But I'm curious what has made this moment different politically. Why is there suddenly this bipartisan effort to pursue carbon capture when that didn't quite kick off before?
Well, I can start out. I just want to mention that I used to be on the board of directors of one of the largest carbon capture sequestration oil enhancement projects in the world, and that's at Dakota Gas. And so we began the process of looking at carbon capture, not because it was an environmental imperative, but because it was a very valuable byproduct that we could sell up into the Weyburn field and enhance their oil production. And so this has long been kind of the goal, is to commercialize this kind of technology. And so I had seen how it works. I know the history that we had with carbon capture. The one thing when I started out here, I would tell the industry, the coal industry, which is very significant in my state, I said, look, if you want my vote, you have my vote. If you want my leadership, you can't be hell no. Because the average age of a coal-fired power plant at that point was butting up on about 50 years, 40, 50 years. And I said, no one's going to give you billions of dollars to invest in new coal generation if you don't solve this problem. It's too big of a variable. And so if you want a future in coal-fired electricity, then you better come to the table and figure this out. And so we started working on a number of projects, both funding at DOE, but also looking at what could enhance and improve the tax credit world, the investment world. And that's how we started. Started from that standpoint that if you take climate out of the discussion and you say, what's the motivation to do this? The motivation has become growth in technology. People who care about climate are obviously coming to this from the standpoint of this is an essential piece, and Sheldon can talk to that. People from the coal industry are coming that this is a lifeline for the future of solve this problem, if we don't enhance the technologies, if we don't commercialize the technologies, that will never become a reality. And so this is a win-win, and it's a great example, I think, of how in legislating you can in fact achieve a win-win on a very contentious issue. If someone had told me Sheldon Whitehouse and Mitch McConnell would be on a carbon capture bill, when I first got here, I would have said that's not likely. But because of the
You would have said it a
enlightenment,
little bit more saltily
yeah,
than
I
that.
would have. I said, kidding me? But Sheldon's been a great partner on this, and I think it demonstrates that when you care about an issue, you're looking for all kinds of solutions, not just one path. So,
Just to interject real quick, I think we have to pick up the mic and talk into it.
oh,
This one?
Camera's back there.
Okay, so there's a room and a camera, so we'll just move this one back and forth as we do that. I would make 3 points about where we are. One is that despite some early failures, carbon capture has become at least credible and is on the list of possible solutions in the portfolio of multiple things that are going to need to be done to solve our climate problems. It is not a silver bullet, but it is a credible part of a climate solutions portfolio, and therefore supporting it makes practical sense. From a political and rhetorical point of view, it's also the first move by the industry to recognize a price on carbon in this bill. Now, it's backwards. It's a positive price. It's a tax credit on carbon. But the conceptual admission that it is actually right to recognize the difference in price of carbon-free versus carbon-emitting technologies, I think was a very important breakthrough, and one that I didn't want to try to stamp out. The other thing is that, in my view, the industry's political position on this issue has been nothing short of reprehensible, and remains so to this day, by and large. So when there are forces within the industry that are trying to reach out and trying to find ways to find a solution, to stamp out those people and to stamp out that effort, I think is not helpful and not productive. It may be the earliest stages of genuine, honest outreach, and if that's the case, I don't want to cut off that genuine, honest outreach. Fed up as I am with what I've been seeing in the non-genuine, non-honest engagement for so many years.
So last year, tax credit passed, SPAN for carbon capture. Both of you, I believe, have co-sponsored the Use It Act, which would be additional various incentives for carbon utilization. But I'm curious how you think about the policy here. Is it just, you pass a tax credit, you pass a few complementary measures, and then sit back and watch the carbon capture industry take off? Or is it something that is a little more analogous to renewable energy, where it took just this host of different policies, constant tweaking of the tax credit, thinking through support along the way? I mean, how do you think about the future of policy?
Well, let me let Heidi jump in, but what I would say as an opening bid is that it is really hard to develop a business model for a process or a product where there is no revenue. So carbon capture has always had to be a funded, specific, one-off, sort of cost-plus type project or product. For the first time, we now have a reliable, consistent, foreseeable, bankable revenue stream for such projects. And we got a lot of people saying we've got the stuff out there to do that. So I think our first step is to see how well the CCUS bill does at having that latent market come to life now for the first time with a real prospect of revenues. And then start to, I think, address with some degree of effect and sincerity the outward concerns about, okay, well, we can do this, but then how the hell are we going to get it to the bottling plant or to the gas manufacturing company or to whomever is going to be the end user? So I guess we're trying to do two things. One, see if there really is a market for this and if we've done enough to bring it to life. And if we haven't, I think we'll keep working on it. And second is to engage with the industry so that when that thing does come to life, whatever the second order problems are, we're already starting to engage with.
I take issue a little bit with your assumption. I mean, Dakota Gas is a classic example where this was driven not by this concern for CO2. It was driven by the fact that CO2 could be a very valuable byproduct. And in fact, it has been instrumental in that plant remaining viable. So this can be commercialized in the right set of circumstances. Now, North Dakota enjoys proximity to the oil field, which is pretty valuable real estate when you're looking at CO2. So let's take Texas, where we see now capture of CO2 with huff and puff technologies into shale plays, where we're actually experiencing increased production. Let's take a look at Petronova, where in fact you're seeing increased oil production. Now, some people will say, well, one carbon fuel for another carbon fuel. But certainly when you're looking at enhanced oil recovery, you're looking at maintaining the same kind of environmental footprint as you're producing more and more oil, recovering more and more resource in place. So I would say that there are examples of great commercialization already. I think that when you're looking at technology development, there's 3 steps. There's incentivizing through the tax code, but we also, with Senator Manchin, have a bill called Action, which is to allow for some unique and discrete investments in technology coming out of DOE. We know that was incredibly helpful investments as it related to renewables, as it related to solar. We can, in fact, jumpstart some of that by making direct investments in these projects. But what's probably the most exciting about all of this is the interest that we're seeing in venture capital, the interest that we're seeing in private investment. So let's go back and take a look at what Bill Gates is investing in. He's investing in direct air capture, moving into transportation fuels. Those kinds of investments, the more buzz we get around carbon capture, utilization, and sequestration, the more it's recognized as a win-win that we can produce saleable fuels, we can produce byproducts that are utilized, which is why Sheldon always says, don't forget the utilization. When we can do that and we can show commercialization, but we also can show that this is part of the piece of the puzzle on climate, that's a real win-win sweet spot that can generate a lot of investment. And I will tell you, as somebody who's been maligned many times by people on my side of the aisle, when I pitch this to folks who feel very strongly about climate, they start getting engaged and interested. And it's kind of fun to see that they're not just going down the path of it all has to be transitioned to renewables. We've got to get people thinking about clean energy as an opportunity, and I think that's rightfully called the third way. What's the third rail of this, and how can we encourage a good stewardship, good environmental progress on these issues, but also recognize that truly all of the above energy policy is good for America. I will tell you that the first project that I think that will utilize this, maybe in the country, but certainly in my state, is an ethanol plant. And so we're looking at this behind industrial CO2 folks who want to commercialize their money, but also want to lower their carbon footprint.
You mentioned a bit the investments by the Energy Department have been helpful in the past. Do you still see a role for that earlier stage research or demonstration support, or are we really in a place where it's time to focus on commercialization at this point?
No, I think there still is an opportunity to build out techniques to here's a great example. We've been doing a lot of chemical extraction of CO2, compression, whatever it is. We know that there's California companies that are looking at filters. Filters could be very, very effective behind a whole lot of processes, including natural gas. Natural gas industry is very interested in this issue as they look at their future as a fuel source for generation of electricity. And so, I think those kinds of technologies, those kinds of investments, when we're looking at them, can help drive, with the 1-2 punch of tax credits along with direct investment, can really drive technology, and driving that technology can be hugely valuable, because the sooner, and Sheldon's smarter than I am about this stuff, but the old adage about technology, at some point you're going to double your knowledge a lot quicker than what you did before. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get enough investment on the front end that it will, in fact, then become this organic thing that happens as technologies grow.
I agree. Department of Energy still needs to be involved and still should be involved, and I would support their continued involvement, even as the private capital folks and, to a lesser degree, the fossil fuel industry put more investment effort into it.
Right. Let's talk about the international side of this a bit. I mean, this is carbon capture right now. There are scattered efforts abroad. There's Norway has some, China has some. I mean, is this really an area that the U.S. can lead on? Are we too far behind some of those other countries?
No, I think we absolutely, definitely can. There's a lot of exciting new projects that I hear about and get briefed on that have not yet reached production and are still kind of at the lab level or the theoretical level. Some of what's going on overseas has to do with better technology. Some of it has to do with better underground, so that when you pump the CO2 down, it chemical reacts and binds, so you don't have to worry about leakage back out. So we are very much, I think, in play to be a leader, to remain a leader in this technology.
Well, I live right next to that very serious security threat to our national security, Canada.
Foes.
I couldn't resist. I could not resist. I will tell you that they're on the ball. They're making this happen. They've been ahead of this, in part because it's been enhanced oil that has driven this, but it has ignited a whole interest in how they're going to deal with their fossil fuel industry, which is absolutely critical to the economics of Canada as we know it today. And so I think I've been to Norway. I think you've been to Switzerland. You've been to Iceland, right?
Saskatchewan.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's not Iceland. Jesus, Sheldon. Anyway, so
I could see North Dakota from
oh,
there.
yeah, you could actually from Esteban. Anyway, so
see much.
yeah. Maybe we will just let you go underwater. Yeah, that's the kind of thing we get into. But my point is that everyone's recognizing this, but we have to be the technology drivers. And if we can commercialize this technology, as we see the growth in whether it's natural gas or coal-fired generation, having those add-ons that include, NOx, SOx, mercury, the things that we've done to clean up over the years, the admissions process, that we just add CO2 to American innovation, and we see the availability of that technology being exported, and that will again, if you look at numbers, one of the things we know is that we aren't going to meet climate goals as outlined by the international community without looking at carbon capture, utilization, and sequestration. And so this is a big and important part of that puzzle. It's a big and important part of an all of the above energy policy that doesn't leave resources abandoned in developing countries that may only have one resource.
So in the course of talking to other members about carbon capture, making the case for investment in carbon capture, I mean, what's the biggest point of skepticism
That it doesn't work, that it can't be commercialized and it doesn't work, that there's no such thing.
And what you usually
Well, I say, well, I don't know what I was doing for 12 years on the board of directors of an organization that did it, so right away, you got to point out that that's not in reality a fact. But the great thing that I will tell you is that with 45Q, there now has been kind of an acceptance that this technology is emerging and possible to be commercialized. And I think that's the big idea or the big ideological shift.
The concern that I hear most often is that this becomes a fake political panacea, and that the whole climate denial operation that has been misleading people for a long, long time now simply moves on to, don't worry, we don't need to do anything because CCUS is going to ride over the hills and save us. And I think there's a very important role for CCUS, and I've fought very hard and worked with Heidi on this, and I think it's a great bill. But I would not want to say that this is the silver bullet solution and that we can go back to just polluting like fiends and don't worry because CCUS will bail us out. But I do think that, particularly on the environmental side, having heard so many misleading and false statements out of the industry for so long, that I think a lot of people have a flinch, have a skepticism that anything like this is going to be turned to rhetorical advantage well beyond its practical value and used to try to beat down other solutions.
And the flip side of that is that, the war on coal has been the war on coal, and these folks aren't honestly coming to the table to kind of allow the industry to move forward. So there's still, none of us should say we've all now linked arms and we're singing Kumbaya. That is not what's happening in this space. But we have offered kind of Switzerland. We've offered that neutral space that I think has mutual benefits to both sides, and that can be the continuing bridge to public policy. We've gone from these incredibly polarized positions to actually doing something in the Congress that addresses concerns on both sides, and that's hopefully an example of what we can do in other spaces like healthcare, other spaces like what's happening with debt and deficit. We need more of the 45Q kind of collaboration in so many of the public policy issues that we're dealing with today.
Of course, if you really want to explode this industry and really have it become a big, big deal, the way to do that is to have a proper full-on price on carbon nationally that then can be factored in with other countries, so you end up with a global price on carbon that blows through all of the regulatory prospects for climate relief. It's the very best outcome that anybody can model right now, is using a price on carbon. And of course, that creates unrestricted revenue for carbon capture. So in a very peculiar way, the fossil fuel industry's relentless attack on pricing carbon, they may actually, in a weird way, be turning out to be the agents of their own destruction, because the carbon price tool, once it's there, is going to create enormous incentive for investment in this area that is the one thing that really creates the potential for offsetting power plant and other fossil fuel carbon emissions. So I think they're so in their political trenches that they haven't kind of thought this thing through, and it's almost a self-destructive loop at this point that, no, we're not going to do anything, no, we're going to deny everything, no, we're going to oppose a price on carbon. And, you put a price on carbon, and it's not going to be just the few flowers that respond to our 45Q bill that bloom. It's going to be a massive international explosion of innovation.
If I can just mention, I think that there's two ways you can incentivize behavior. You can use a carrot and a stick. The industry, and I think with some legitimacy, considers carbon tax a stick. I think that it's not going to pass. I think it's the discussion that you're going to see over in the House in the next couple days. But I think it's always best to accentuate the positive, which I think is the carrot here, which is 45Q.
So I guess that's a good question, is if with some of these measures you start to see carbon capture projects actually get built, use the tax credit, you see more and more of these, does that potentially shift the politics at all on energy issues, on climate issues? Another way of asking is what the future of this coalition might be and whether it could work on other energy issues besides carbon capture or evolve over time.
I hope so. I think it's an important coalition, and it is good to have, to use Heidi's term, Switzerland, where people can come in and talk to each other, and kind of a proven Switzerland where we actually really did a couple of really good things. And we do need to wait and see what the response is and whether there's a practical result that is consistent with what we hope for. But I do think it's an important opening for other conversations. My guess is that the thing that is probably going to drive this most violently at when these eventualities happen is either the coastal property value meltdown that everybody from the Union of Concerned Scientists to the Risk and Insurance Trade publication to Freddie Mac is now predicting, or the carbon bubble crash that is now being predicted throughout the economics community up to and including the Bank of England. So these are some pretty serious warnings, and I think that is going to help drive conversation when we see the early stages of those calamities begin to manifest themselves.
So over the next few years, I mean, what should we really be expecting in the realm of carbon capture? And are there particular milestones you'll be looking for, or things you'll be looking out for or wary of?
I think a reasonably priced direct air capture would be an important goal. The development of industries that get into the emission stream of major emitters and take advantage of the carbon dioxide concentrations, whether it's to grow algae or to do other things, I think would be another really strong place to look. I think trying to find ways in which the value of carbon capture is not discounted or diminished or offset by it being used to create other fossil fuel oil production is where the big payoff from a climate point of view is going to come. And that's going to come when direct air capture or alternative uses than enhanced oil recovery become marketable.
I don't disagree. I think that we've got something that we've been working on quite a bit in North Dakota called the alum cycle. It'll be interesting to see if that jump starts. I don't think we know. I think Sheldon's given you some incredible kind of outline of what we know is out there right now. But I think of all the things that are really intriguing, it's large air capture, because one of the things that if you look at climate goals, the ability to do a commercially successful air capture system and actually make that matter is absolutely fascinating. And if you look at where private venture capital is, whether it's Bill Gates or whoever it is, a lot of that is going into air capture. So people don't believe that can happen. The point is that CO2 is a resource. It's not. It's a commodity. It's not a waste product. And there is a way to utilize CO2 moving forward. I mean, it's just fascinating what is out there. And that's one of the things that we hope will be driven in the media, is a continuing discussion of the innovation and the ideas. I think there was just a story in Scientific America, a lot of the kind of more, not detailed trade publications, but the more, wonky science publications for consumption of the average American is more and more talking about these. And the more we get the ideas out there, the more likely it is that we're going to be successful in growing this idea and growing the technology and growing the investment.
Well, I think that's a great note to end on. I think we're up for time, but thank you so much. This was fantastic.
Well, thank you.
I just want to add a final word of appreciation to my colleague here, because there's a fairly hostile battleground in Congress between the fossil fuel industry and those who are concerned about fossil fuel industry emissions and consequences. And Heidi has shown real courage, real initiative, and real smarts. She's really sweated the details and got this stuff right, and she's gone way, way, way out of her way to come out of the trenches and try to find a way to have a Christmas truce or a Switzerland or whatever you want to call it. And I just wanted to make sure that I recognized that before we left. This is a little bit easier for me to be for, and it's a little bit trickier for Heidi, and I respect what she has done enormously, and we all should.
Yeah, but I want to add to that, because Sheldon is understating how much grief he's taken within his community for aligning himself with a number of us who have been working on this project. And because of his leadership, we have moved this issue along like dramatically. Because sometimes when you say things over and over and over again, they look at you and say, yeah, that's just you. But when he's standing next to John Barrasso and Shelley Moore Capito and me and the coal industry executives saying this is essential, that gives it a whole new look. And you know, he's being way too modest.
John and Shelley between me and the coal executive.
That's good for them. Thank you.
Thank you so much.